Hi everyone, in this video let's talk about the predictions for the stock market and in general for the week of June 27, 2022. In terms of the stock market, I think it's going to be a down week overall. On Monday, expect market to go down, then on Tuesday and Wednesday for market to recover to up, and then again Thursday and Friday, I expect there to be a drop, especially towards the end of the week. This is going to be a fairly eventful week. We will have several important transits. So one in particular is Pluto and Mars squaring each other. And of course, there will be a new moon on the 28th, which will be in Cancer. So in terms of the Monday's specific transits, this is when we will start experiencing the effects of Mars and Pluto squaring each other, which is typically a fairly volatile transit and may coincide with increased protests, various disasters, strong earthquakes, accidents, and since Pluto is in Capricorn, those accidents may lead to structural damage, fires associated with Mars, and also problems for like athletes or people who are engaging in risky professions or risky activities. So somebody's like a daredevil or jumping, with the, parachute or doing something crazy, that is not a good time to do that, and especially around the 28th, which is the new moon, and the 30th, where we will have a T-square between Moon, Mars, and Pluto. So the effect, I think, may have already started this last weekend. In fact, on Sunday, I saw there was some news about a bullfight in Colombia where a stadium had basically crashed down and some people were killed and like hundreds of people were injured. But as I said, the intensification of this transit we can expect around the 28th, through 30th. However, this transit will continue to stay, the effect rather of this transit will continue throughout, say, about the 4th and 5th of July. So other things that have coincided with this kind of transit in the past, as I said, were violent attacks, just people kind of being more rude, more angry, road rage kind of accidents, and also accidents involving large structures collapsing, shakeups, literally earthquakes, but it also could be shakeups involving governmental or corporate entities, maybe like a large corporation announcing layoffs or announcing some sort of restructuring or changes in the leadership. Earthquakes that come at this time may be stronger than usual, and in particular I see there's some important transits that are formed to the charts of Taiwan and Turkey, so those might be some areas where perhaps one should be more careful. And generally speaking, things that are old, inflexible, or just kind of uplift their, life cycle, that's where we can see some issues or damages. Similarly, Pluto has to do with things like prisons, recycling facilities, things that are underground, maybe some storage facility for discarded, trash or even nuclear fuel. Pluto has to do with nuclear power plants, etc. So in the square to Mars, there may be some problems where, again, there's anger about these issues, protests against such either facilities or projects, and or something can be just literally overheating with Mars, basically in areas leading to increased kind of heat or excessive speed, leading to something basically malfunctioning or something that's like too old, too inflexible and rigid, unfortunately giving way, and this may not be, again, the best time to be engaging in risky activities, but also avoid as much as possible people who are just prone to, losing their temper, and just to be on the safe side. Let's see, and generally speaking, again, not the best time for taking risks, and the fact that this also happens to be under the new moon or around the time of new moon, this may also mean that events that occur around this time will have significance through about the 13th of July, which is where we will have a full moon. Another important area that is ruled by Pluto in general has to do with mines, mining, and Pluto in Capricorn is symbolic of things related to like coal or minerals, as well as certain metals. So it's possible that if there's an accident or fire, it may actually occur in an underground location, such as a mine or a tunnel that goes through the mountains, which is, again, those are the symbols for Capricorn. So definitely if there's a danger situation or there's a possibility of something collapsing, definitely this is the time where safety checks should be especially adhered to, and or certainly any potential issues should not be disregarded and really should be paid close attention to. As I mentioned before, this transit around the new moon is going to make significant transits or other aspects to the charts of Taiwan and Turkey. For the US at the same time, there will also be several important transits that they're not necessarily indicative of any like earthquakes, but rather they're indicative of there being some important focus on Jupiterian matters, where we will have basically sun and the sun and moon at the same time. Obviously at the time of new moon there will be hovering right around Jupiter in the US chart, and at the same time transiting Jupiter is going to be squaring US Jupiter. So this is a double kind of focus on Jupiter. It has to do with things like, say, fats and oils, of course immigration, laws, judges, any legal issues, foreign relations, and any sort of important laws and regulations that affect things like international travel, import-export, and things of that nature, also higher education. So what we might expect at this time, and I guess there already are some events in the US where I was expecting it maybe occurring around the 28th, but already happened last week, that where there was this Roe versus Wade was overturned. But again, this is just the time of, generally speaking, these Jupiterian matters coming to the sort of forefront of the news. And because of the square between the two, the focus may be on how something is expanding, maybe either too much, or something is overdone, or is out of proportion, or basically there's some sort of imbalance. Again, square has to do with like tensions and things not quite being in balance, or, you know, things are perpendicular to each other. And so basically there may be some tensions around whatever the legal changes are announced at this time. And again, beyond just Roe versus Wade, it could also be with, say, partnerships with some international companies to maybe transport something long distance. Things of that nature may either be basically whatever the agreement is signed, there may be some issues where things are kind of, again, out of proportion, then things are not equally distributed, where one side maybe is obligated to do more than another side, or Jupiter also has to do with things like kind of overlooking some details. So maybe a large picture looks good, but once one starts looking at the details, something may be missing or is overlooked. So that's kind of the danger with square between, you know, Jupiter and Jupiter. At the same time, as I mentioned, since right now we also are experiencing Mars square Pluto, and Pluto happens to be hovering or rather basically conjuncting Pluto in the US chart in the second house of finance. This also means that Mars is squaring US Pluto. All right, so basically what it is that this particular transit that we're experiencing this weekend through about July 5th for the US seems to be significant, where there might be some upsets, you know, Mars, or even protests or angry, I guess, outbursts or angry negotiations that have to do with something, some sort of reforms that, you know, that's what Pluto symbolizes, like death and rebirth, major changes, major transformations, and they will likely have to do with, again, financial sector, since Pluto is in the US second house. So this could be some announcements about changes, or like I said, shakeups that involve maybe a bank or something related to currency or investments or value, where again there's some shakeup or some decision is made that is seen as, again, aggravating, and or in the process of discussing some financial policies, there may be a lot of tensions, a lot of arguments. So that's sort of at best. And the worst, of course, there may be some problems related specifically to the second house, maybe some problems for certain banks, for the currency, concerns about, you know, value losses, concerns about the stock market direction. And again, especially for this week, that would be the 28th and 30th, and I guess 29th as well in between. Those are the days that maybe we will see this kind of influence, this aggravation, or important announcements or even shakeups. And for the US, specifically in the area related to finance, that's where that may be maximized for this week. So for the US specifically, this week I expect there might be some important announcements related to finance, real estate, earnings, rates, currency, etc. right around especially the 28th through the 30th. And in particular, I think that we may see a reversal regardless of the direction, but I think most likely from down to up, where the 28th and the 29th will actually be, maybe we'll see a slight up move, but then on the 30th, I think things will go down. And that's because on the 28th and 29th, there actually are some supportive transits between like Sun and Jupiter. Even though it's a square, it still may bring some optimism. Whether it's sort of grounded or not, that's a different story. And also there will be a sextile between Venus and Jupiter at the time, 28th, 29th. So again, this makes things a little bit more hopeful. You know, it doesn't really matter whether things are sort of based in reality or not, but just the sense of kind of things are still being hopeful and there's some optimism. 29th, I think actually may still see market going up, but then by the 30th, I think this kind of a positivity may wear off, or this positive move, the hope may, whatever, may not be realized. And I think that's where we will see actually a turn in the direction. So Thursday and Friday look more difficult, both because, again, supportive transits will no longer be there, and this energy of Mars squaring Pluto, including US Pluto, is going to be stronger. Plus, also on Saturday, we will actually see Mercury squaring Neptune, which again typically coincides with also kind of disillusionment or some other problems, which I'll mention some more on in just a second. But generally speaking, again, we can expect more of a kind of a, not somber, but more confused or angry mood towards the end of the week, which I think may coincide with market going down. Another important transit that is worth mentioning for this week is actually a long-term kind of slowly unfolding transit that is already happening for China. It started from about the 6th of June and will continue in three sort of phases from about early June to late July this year, then late September to, let's say, late November of this year. And then again, the final pass will be late March through early May of 2023. And that is when we will have a transiting Uranus will square China's Pluto, that happens to be in the 7th house of partners and rules the 10th house of like leadership and a status on the world arena. And of course, Uranus to Pluto square do not happen very often, but that is fairly significant. Transit is indicative of some sort of, I'd say, revolution or acting in a way that's kind of unpredictable, or not really feeling very like compliant, or basically, since this Pluto resides in the 7th house of partners, so perhaps rebelling against certain existing partnerships or entering into partnerships that are unusual with partners that perhaps the country hasn't worked as closely before, or doing something that's kind of out of the norm, out of the ordinary sort of pace of things. And or also Uranus has to do with things like electricity, airlines, airspace, networks, IT, you know, technology and things like that. So there could also be partnerships or contracts or changes in, again, the existing contracts, for example, or existing partnerships that have to do with these areas. And again, it may be something either revolutionary along the lines of some innovative new projects, or it could be, again, breaking of the status quo, which again may come either unexpectedly, or it may be may involve some unusual terms where, again, new partners or partners are entering on terms that, again, may not have been expected. So something different and unusual about that. At the same time, since the Pluto, of course, rules, like I said, the 10th house has to do with leadership. So there may be some unexpected changes in leadership. So perhaps a new person, like some minister or something, is appointed to a new position. There's some reshuffling at the heads of some important corporations or, I don't know, government entities. But something that is, again, unpredictable, fairly sudden, and again, may involve especially areas that have to do with Uranian kind of areas. So again, could be airlines, IT, anything involving technology, airspace, and things of that nature. So this transit, as I mentioned, has already started for China from the early June, but actually it will be fairly precise this week. So it will be fairly significant. And as I mentioned, since we already have a new moon and Mars square Pluto this week, just the fact that China's transit from Uranus to China's Pluto that also is occurring this week just seems to be kind of making things a little bit more important. So I would definitely pay attention to any announcements that perhaps may be indicative of what this general trend for China may be. If there are any announcements again of any unusual partnerships or projects that involve like airspace, for example, any rockets or anything like that, including of course anything that has to do with, like, I guess, uranium, plutonium. Literally those are the names of the planets, and Pluto has to do with nuclear power. So anything to do with any sort of like partnerships or deals related to those areas, if they're announced this week, I would say that's definitely could be the area where things may continue, where perhaps the initial projects, initial planning, initial shakeups or reshuffling could occur this week or through the end of July, really. But then the follow-up, maybe some sort of rethinking of who really should, be kept at which position, what the conditions of, some partnership or sale should be. That could then come in the fall of this year. And then finally, the actual, like, maybe realization of the project, where things are finally either built or signed, or somebody's finally, I guess, takes the position, or basically some sort of finalization of this ongoing transit will occur in some time in the spring of next year. But again, this is something to look out for this week specifically, and that's specifically for China. Other issues that may potentially come up, again, for China during these 3 times that I just mentioned, especially this week, because both the transit to China's chart is significant, as well as separately on a global level, we're experiencing Pluto being squared by Mars, which has to do often with things like secret, situations or situations that occur on the ground, including at the mine. It's also possible that if indeed there is a mining accident or accident that occurs underground, that indeed may involve China just because of the transit to China's chart. Of course, it could be anywhere, and certainly people should just pay attention to any signals about maybe some problems at some mine, but that is certainly a potential for China's chart just because of transit to its chart. Other areas may also involve things like power plants, nuclear power, recycling facilities, even prisons. So if there's like a fire or an accident, again, both globally and for China, those are the areas where things may happen. And again, for China, this is ongoing influence, but for sort of everywhere in the world, this week in particular may see some kind of incident along those lines. Now let's talk a little bit more about the new moon in Cancer on June 28th. So what we will have is going to be Sun and Moon together in Cancer. And Cancer, of course, is a very sensitive sign. So topics that may come up during this new moon in the news or relevant sort of in the public consciousness and will remain sort of valid or remain focused through about the 13th of July, when we will have a full moon, and there may be some follow-up events or culmination along the same lines. They will involve topics related to Cancer, so it could be like motherhood, parenting, family, food, agriculture, farming, real estate, and banks assets. So if there are announcements around the 28th of June, like I said, there may be follow-up events or resolution or some kind of culmination of something that comes up on the 13th of July. And because of this kind of focus on emotions, there may also just be some emotionally rattling, I guess, or some shake-up type of events where people may react overly emotionally to those, and therefore, again, there may be some either fearful overreaction in the markets, or people can just be kind of not making rational decisions about their investments. And that's just one thing to kind of look out for, where, if this transit falls in sensitive areas in your chart, to not be kind of overreacting, try to fall back on things that kind of make you feel safe and secure, and to not allow like this sort of fear or anxiety to overtake, the sort of a practical approach. And also for investments, since Sun and Moon, of course, both symbolize gold and silver, and conjunction in Cancer, which is ruled by Moon, further emphasizes silver. There may be increased news again both around the new moon and through the 13th, which again maybe see some culmination of some events or some follow-up news. May also highlight gold and silver at the same time. And it's possible that because of some anxiety or some shakeup, and again with Mars squaring Pluto in the US house, it's possible that second house, it's possible that there might be some shakeup related to the banks or some concerns about real estate or some bank stability, some sense of insecurity because again some shakeup or some angry situation, and people may tend to maybe lean more towards safe, what they perceive to be safe, secure investments, again just to kind of feel inwardly more secure and reassured. So that could be potentially the psychology that may express itself in the market as again investing more into gold and silver just because again a feeling of some anxiety. Another possibility with this new moon in Cancer in terms of specifically investments is where people may be feeling kind of nostalgic, because Cancer also has to do with things like again family, sort of early upbringing, and things that bring this sense of like nostalgia, kind of looking back, retro, vintagey things may also become either really popular again in the news, or if there is, I don't know, a new product or service that somehow combines this kind of vintage clothing or movies from, I don't know, the 80s or whatever it might be, whatever feels nostalgic to people. Those kind of products or services may actually be more popular at this particular time, and again through about the 13th of July. And if this wasn't enough, the new moon on the 28th, plus Sun being squared by Jupiter, plus we have Mars and Pluto being in square, we will also have Neptune turning retrograde on the 28th. And Neptune, of course, has to do with things like oil, gas, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, beverages, navy, flooding, water, precipitation, and things of that nature. So right around the same time, the 28th of June, we may expect increased focus on things related to Neptune. So maybe again with this dangerous sort of energy from Mars and Pluto, it may have to do with either some accident where something occurs near water or involves perhaps like a vessel of some sort, like a fishing vessel, I don't know. Or it could have to do with news about oil and gas and or chemicals, pharmaceuticals, anything to do with those Neptunian areas. There might be some reversal in the decision, reversal perhaps in prices, reversal in regulations, or something where there's either a setback, delay, or kind of a situation where some projects held back, or there's a need to revisit or revise some sort of situation. So it may be again put on hold pending some kind of decision or regulations. And that, of course, may affect, the prices, or it may affect some shipments. So maybe some shipment was authorized to pass through, and again, may have to do with like passing over body of water, or a shipment that involves, chemicals, for example. But then right around the 28th, things may kind of slow down, and suddenly there's a delay. And as I mentioned before, on this Saturday, we will actually have Mercury square Neptune, and of course, Neptune at that point will be retrograde, so that again may bring yet additional focus on things like travel delays, problems again related to areas of like oil and gas. Maybe it's going to be hard to buy something like that, or again there's just navigation errors due to maybe a fog or some malfunctioning instrument or just miscommunication. And on top of that, right around 5 p.m. New York time on Saturday, while we will have more or less precise square between Mercury and Neptune, we will also have Moon, transiting Moon, squaring more or less precisely with like 1 degree Moon node. So something is indicative of, again, some tensions or some public events. So if there are indeed like accidents, or if there's like a flood or foggy weather, or places, again, that's global transit anywhere in the world where there might be, again, excessive precipitation, floods, or fog, or something that is normally already is difficult kind of for transportation at that time, again, whatever the time is for you in the world, but right around, like I said, 5 p.m. Eastern time for the US on Saturday is definitely not the best time for traveling, especially if you have to travel to a new place that you don't know where it is, like you don't know what the directions are, or there's like fog or rain. Definitely the time to wait that out, either travel earlier in the day, or travel maybe on Sunday, or don't even travel at all if possible, just because there's an increased probability of people either getting confused, or just like driving on slippery surfaces. Basically not the best time for transporting things. And if indeed there is like a ship or some sort of vessel. There may be some news on Saturday of it getting lost, or there's some problems with waves or anything of that nature. Basically, not the best time for those kind of Neptunian activities. And as a preview of either a future video or a post that I'm working on right now for my blog at dostomka.com, at the end of July into early to mid August, we will have a major conjunction between Mars, Uranus, and Rahu. I already put a YouTube video on that, but in the meantime, I've been looking at some more transits in the past and what kind of events occurred under those transits. And I saw that in addition to just some major disasters like a plane crash or a major hurricane, what I saw that there were some interesting major announcements that had meaningful impact on either geopolitics. So some countries or some large entities would kind of join together, or something was annexed, and or there was there were news about founding of some major companies that then would have stayed on or continued to be sort of in the public eye for decades and decades, if not hundreds of years. And also another thing that occurred relatively recently in 2019 and then in 2015, there were multiple crashes of currencies. So specifically like the USD and Japanese yen. In 2019, there was also a Swiss franc crash in 2015, and those had occurred right around the time when Uranus was either squaring or conjuncting, moon nodes. So I'm not saying that this is exactly what might happen right around, I'd say, end of July, early August of this year, but certainly with Uranus being in Taurus, some sort of either mini flash crash or some sort of changes, sudden, unpredictable changes in the value of some currency, potentially a cryptocurrency, are definitely likely. In addition to Uranus and Mars being conjunct one of the nodes, I believe Rahu, North Node, we will also have Saturn squaring that triple conjunction within 1 or 2 degrees, so fairly precisely. And of course, when we have difficult transits between Saturn and Uranus, typically it coincides with market going down, and also specifically for Bitcoin, when Saturn and Uranus had previously were in precise square, Bitcoin also dipped. And so basically what I'm saying is that it's possible that one of the situations that we may see at the end of July and into early August may see again some problems for one or more currencies, which then of course may trigger subsequently maybe a mini flash crash or even some short-term crash in the market, but something that may be unexpected and relate to finance and or currency. So definitely an interesting area to watch and be prepared for. And again, that will be later in July, early August. So until then, I hope you have a fantastic week. Again, be careful driving on Saturday. And until then, I'll see you guys later. Bye.